a piece of paper that should be on a table nearby if you wish to ask any questions. All right, it doesn't appear to be any questions. So I now declare public question time closed at 6:07. Item 7, new business of an urgent nature. There is no new business of an urgent nature. Identification of matters for which the meeting may be closed. No items have been identified as confidential for this evening. 9, adoption of recommendations en bloc. There are no items for consideration en bloc for the special meeting of council. Item 10, reports. We now move on to the item for this evening, C26383, 2026 to 2027 rating strategy. Can I please have a mover and seconder for the officer's recommendation? Councillor McGoldrick moved, seconded. Councillor Lim. Okay, so is there anyone who wishes to speak against this? Okay, thank you. We'll open the debate. Councillor McGoldrick.
Sounds good. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll defer my right to speak, please.
Well, you have a right to speak at the beginning to open the debate and a right to speak to end the debate. So you're not really deferring anything, you're just opting not to speak on it.
Thank you,
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Lim, do you wish to speak now or later?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll speak later if that's possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll take a speaker against. Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll keep my comments brief, but I'm sure it comes as no surprise to anyone around the table. But look, I'm opposing this, but only to the extent that it's calling for a 5.5% advertised rate in the dollar. I would be much more comfortable if it was 5%, and there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, Perth's CPI at the moment is approximately 4.9%, so a 5% proposed increase in rates I think is more consistent with that and understandable, and I think that can be justified and supported. I also note that in the long-term financial plan and our modelling, there is natural rate growth as well on top of the increase in rates, which varies from year to year, but generally with residential, I think we estimate approximately 1% natural rate growth, which effectively is an additional amount that we collect on top of the increase proposed. And just finally, I think at the moment, all of you would be aware with the federal budget being handed down tonight, I believe, probably has been handed down already. Cost of living pressures are front and centre for everyone and for every level of government, and certainly in the federal budget there are measures dealing with that and addressing that, and we've seen that in the state budget as well, and I think we can also play our part, even though it's a small difference at the end of the day. I think keeping the proposed increase to 5% is more defendable. It lessens the impact on ratepayers, and it gives them some certainty to know that their council rates bill will not increase by effectively more than 5%, because whatever rate we advertise, we can't set the increase higher than what we advertise. So effectively, it would be either 5% or lower. So for that reason, I don't support the 5.5%. The rest of the motion, the recommendation from the officers, I'm very supportive of, and I would like to thank the officers for all the work they've put into the budget. There were some pretty significant last-minute changes as well around the unimproved land and the increase proposed for that, and I think that's I support that increase, and I think it's justified in the current environment, particularly with the housing, the shortage of housing in our community, and the difficulties young people have in entering the housing market. I think encouraging any unimproved land to be developed is a good thing. And over time, as those rates increase, it will, I think, increase the attractiveness for those property owners to develop their properties. and not for the land not to sit idle for long periods of time. So on that note, I will wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodall. Councillor Spanbrook, are you speaking for or against the motion?
Against, Madam Mayor.
Okay, well, I'm going to take a speaker for. Is there a speaker for? Councillor Barber.
Yeah, I've got a question, Madam Mayor, so it might be appropriate to ask it now. It's just this process, and for clarity, we are not deciding categorically that we're going to put a 5.5% rate increase. The process is, and I guess I'm doing this for clarity for myself and for residents, this is what we're advertising, and we're going to vote on it after community feedback. Is that correct?
Mr Tuffin, Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Barber. Yes, that is correct. So what we're seeking tonight is for Council's authorisation to place a notice. We'll advertise that for 21 days and then bring back those submissions. At this point in time, it's anticipated the budget would be adopted at the ordinary council meeting in June, which I believe is the 18th of June.
Yep, thanks, Madam Mayor. So just again, so we make this decision tonight and then the community have 21 days to give us feedback, and we take all of that sort of thing on board and then we vote on it in June. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, the Director of Corporate Services looks like he's forgotten something.
Mr Tuffin, Director of Corporate Services.
Apologies, Madam Mayor. Just a quick correction. That the next OCM is scheduled for the 16th of June, not the 18th.
Thank you for that correction. I'm looking for a speaker for. Councillor Barber, you were speaking, just clarifying, were you?
I think
You
I
weren't
was just
speaking.
clarifying that, Madam Mayor. If that was
clarifying.
okay with you?
Could
Right.
I just ask
I
a
need-
question, please, Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Robbins.
Thank you. So just to follow on from Councillor Barber's question, so if we support the officer recommendation tonight for 5.5%, then the officers will prepare a budget based on a 5.5% increase. And then I guess I'm just seeking clarity on the process. So we seek feedback from the community. If the councillors decide that, okay, we don't support the 5.5 because there was so much negative feedback from the community, what then is the process for us reducing that 5.5% at the ordinary meeting of council? Do we have to individually identify projects to take out, or can we just move that it be 4.5 or 4 instead of the 5.5? Thank you.
Director Tuffin, Corporate Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we will prepare 2 budgets, but we'd also anticipate a further workshop with Council prior to considering the final budget. So there will be an opportunity to consider those submissions and provide administration with some further feedback.
Just to follow up to that, if I can, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Robbins.
Could I just seek clarity on what those 2 budgets are? Are they just different percentage increases, or will there be other differences as well?
Director Tuffin.
But that's really at the discretion of Council. What we would propose to do at this point is reduce the transfers from reserves as opposed to adding additional projects.
Okay, I'm looking for a speaker for. Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question. So just wondering, and this is a question to the officers as well, is the reason why we have to increase rates by above CPIs because we, approved an unbudgeted item last month of 4.7 million? Thank you.
Director Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, it's really at the discretion of Council in terms of what rate revenue. I'll just make that clarification too. So what we're seeking is a total increase in rate revenue. It's not a percentage against the rate in the dollar.
Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think I just recall from the EMISs, we are sort of factoring, a rate increase over, so like a proposed rate increase for the next 10 or 20 years, and then we're projecting that. Has that been factored in the unbudgeted item when we did that EMIS presentation? Thank you.
Director Tuffin.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'm just trying to find some relevant information. Won't be. Just very briefly, as I understood it, recall we were looking for an additional 200,000 in the 26-27 financial year, and then it was actually spread over the next 4 years. So what will happen based on the decision that council made, we will look at readjusting the long-term financial plan to accommodate that. And also at the last meeting, there was also a decision not to proceed with a project that had a value attached in the order of about $695,000. So the $200,000 increase in that project could be funded through that reduction in those funds.
That's okay. I don't feel like it's been answered. This is more just wanting to see if the last month's decision has been factored in that modelling that we did, last week at the EMIS. That's, yeah.
Mr Tuppen, Director Tuppen.
In short, to answer your question, no, it hadn't been until such time as council had made that decision.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm looking for a speaker for Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I just want to speak to the 5.5% as an advertised rate for the community to come back and give us feedback on it. I want to just touch on something that Councillor Woodall said about the funding of projects. I think, what did you say? You said something about, I haven't written down what you said. You were talking about that the rate in the dollar, 5.5% is a lot of money, and with cost of living crises, we've got to be really careful how we spend our money and the decisions that we make. So I want to just come back to our long-term financial plan and our decision making. The long-term financial plan, we've just found out recently, does not have every project listed in it. We've recently made a decision of council to fund a project that was not listed in the long-term financial plan. Whilst it also was listed in the ARIS report, I want to point out too that the ARIS report, when it came to council, was not endorsed as a strategy. It was merely noted by council. So we've just seen the state budget released last week, and we have the federal budget released this evening. I've had a quick look at it. There's nothing in there. There's no splashes for cash for local governments outside of housing infrastructure and other projects. There is no funding for additional projects within it. We also have to look at the decisions we are making next week, where we have a couple of scout groups wanting to save their buildings. So what would the impact be if we then decide to find money in the budget for those buildings? How will that affect our rates? And these community groups have a real desire as well to keep their buildings. So there's so much going through my head right now in this. So I think if we've got a CPI of 4.9% right now, and
I'd like to call a point of order.
What's your point of order?
Is Councillor Wheatland debating here? Because
it's a special meeting of council.
Yeah, Councillor, she's making points pertinent to the budget.
I'm speaking for the motion.
Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you. And so I think it's really important that we've got CPI set at 4.9%, not by us. We've got a GRV year, that we go out with a figure that's not going to impact on future decisions of community groups and also sporting groups and infrastructure that we need to maintain and uphold across the city. It's not fair on our community, it's not fair on our staff, and it's certainly, we need to go out with this 5.5%, dare I say it, for the community to have their say. So I ask you all to really deeply consider not our views, but the views of the community, because if we dip into our reserves, it's going to impact the future residents and ratepayers of the city. We've got a youth strategy that still has not been implemented, and it was endorsed as a strategy I can't remember, 4 years ago or something. So please consider this, consider our community, and it's advertising rate in the dollar. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wheatland. Councillor Spanbrook, speaking against.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I do speak against the 5.5%. Just a few short months ago, that the rate that was thrown around was 3.5% to 4%. And I do understand that the increase in inflation, and of course, data released by the ABS, the March quarter showed 4.6%, which was, of course, in 12 months to February, it was an increase from 3.7%. So yes, inflation is one of the big drivers here. But in saying that, in the same vein as Councillor Woodall, that we also do need to be very considerate of the cost of living and the other ongoing pressures that that are impacting everything, even from parks and gardens, and you're just maintaining services throughout the city. So, and just one other thing I wish to make a point on, actually two really, that there seems to be this incessant discussion around the $4.68 million resolution that was made in April, that this is going to impact this budget. As Director Tuffin just explained, only $200,000 of that, and there is an offset for that, that will cover that for the 26-27 budget. So these rates, what is actually being put forward right now, is not being impacted by the $4.68 million. And also with the 21 days that residents do
Point of order.
to actually...
I think,
point of order.
Yes, what's your point of order?
It's misleading. Mr Tuffin just said that $200,000 has to be factored into the budget.
Okay, Councillor
Let's just go
Spanbrook.
back to Mr Tuffin. Let's just go back to Mr Tuffin if we may.
Point of order. Can you make a judgment on the point of order, please, Madam Mayor?
Councillor Spanbrook, Mr Tuffin, or Director Tuffin did make a comment to that effect. Can you please repeat that comment, Mr Tuffin, for the benefit of Councillor Spanbrook?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Prior to the formal decision of council, it hadn't been included in the long-term financial plan or budget. Subsequently, we will or have made provision for that $200,000 in the draft budget.
So, Councillor Spanbrook, I suggest you move on with your debate about the 5.5%. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Director Tuffin just explained that the 4.68 million, that the resolution for that in April, that it was not included in the draft budget. That's the key word, the draft
Point of
budget.
order.
Councillor Spanbrook,
Point of order.
can you please move on?
Point of order.
Councillor Wheatland.
Councillor Spanbrook again is being misleading after your ruling and after information from the city's officer, and she's still talking over me.
Councillor Spanbrook, please move on with your debate. I have asked you to do that, and you've had 2 points of order on exactly the same thing. Please move on.
Madam Mayor, I would like you to actually look at this fairly, please, because I don't feel as if you're actually treating me fairly in this
Point
process.
of order.
What is your point of order, Councillor
Again,
Wheatland?
like you've made a ruling and Councillor Spanbrook is not following the meeting procedures, local law, written laws. I can get that out if you like.
Councillor Spanbrook, can you please move on with your debate?
I have already left it. It was already signed off before...
Councillor, please move on from that topic. It has been explained by Director Tuffin already. Can you please debate the issue at hand and not continue along those lines?
Once again, I have already closed what I was saying. I've already said earlier that they will leave it there. I'll say it again, I will leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spanbrook. We're looking for a speaker for? Councillor Barber.
I'll speak for Madam Mayor. I do think that you were a bit harsh on Councillor Spanbrook, actually, and didn't let her give her clear process.
Councillor Barber,
but I'll
there was
carry
a
on.
point of order, if I can just say.
Point of order to
please
me.
take that into consideration.
Okay.
Councillor Barber, please consider with your debate. Continue with your debate.
Thank you. Look, I'm speaking for because I understand that we are advertising this. I've heard from my colleagues. I hope that the community get on board with their feedback. I hope they consider the projects and services that we do provide which is why 5.5% would be outstanding. Melville is a great place to live in. However, I also recognise that it is slightly higher than the CPI. Cost of living is a factor and it is a GRV year. So I'm voting in favour of this because it's just we're just advertising it. It's not a decision maker tonight. And as Mr Tuffin has said, we'll be deciding in June, on the 16th of June. So I say yes, that we should just advertise this rate and then get the community to absolutely speak to us and let us know what they think.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Is there a speaker against?
Madam Mayor, I have a question, a quick question.
Yes, Councillor Green.
Through you, Madam Mayor, for Director Tuffin, I just want to clarify 100% the decisions from the April OMC involved a decision around John Connell Reserve and also a decision around Esplanade lighting. It's my firm belief that if you put those two together when we're talking about the 26-27 budget, that those two decisions were a net saving for the 26-27 budget. Can you please confirm that?
Director Tuffin?
Yes, thank you for the question. Partially correct. My understanding is that that lighting project was being funded from a general annual allocation in relation to lighting, but in terms of offsetting the 200,000 from the intended 600,000+, that's what we intend to do.
So in pure dollars and cents terms, as opposed to, you know, where the money's actually coming from, it's a net saving?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Residents are out there cutting costs, delaying bills and doing it tough, yet tonight we're considering sending them a bigger one. I think that's out of touch. CPI is sitting at 4.9% and we're looking here at a rate increase of 5.5%. Most residents I speak to can live with a rate increase at CPI, but they start to get frustrated and ask lots of questions when we say we're going to increase it by more than that. There's some projects that the City of Melville has embarked on, and as a council we've resolved that we will do those projects, so I won't go into too much detail, but I personally just can't support continuing to slug our ratepayers for projects that I think are unjustifiable. Spending $60 million on a library and cultural centre, $4.8 million on a cricket pitch and $9 million on healing gardens, I think is not the way we should be going. And I think we need to take another look at those projects because our residents, as I said at the start, our residents are doing it really tough. A lot of people are making some pretty drastic measures to save money in their own households, and we're doing the opposite here. And I just think that we need to be taking a good hard look at where we are spending our ratepayers' money. And I know it's not always easy to make decisions about changing projects that we've already agreed to, but I think we're in difficult times and we need to make difficult decisions. When inflation is high, governments can't keep increasing their budgets at the same rates as usual. We need to find ways to reduce spending. You know, as others have mentioned, the state budget was released last week, the federal budget tonight, and there's been criticism of those budgets that the governments just keep spending and it's contributing to inflation, and it's irresponsible. We can't, and as a local government, we can't just keep putting on more projects and asking ratepayers to foot the bill. It's the same for local government as it is for state and federal. Another issue I have with what's before us is the proposal to just keep dipping into our reserves. Again, I find it irresponsible to do that rather than just to find ways to save money. You know, we're told time and time again that we have assets that are depreciating, that we don't have enough money in the bank to replace assets as they come to the end of their life. And, you know, I've got young kids and I want them to grow up in a beautiful city of Melville like we have now. But if we just keep spending the money that we have in the bank, then that's not going to be possible. So, yeah, I can't support that. I've already talked a bit about cost of living, so I won't go on about that. But just lastly, I just want to address the argument that we're just advertising the 5.5. I just want to say to my fellow councillors that it's going to be a lot harder to pull it back when it comes time to adopt the budget next month if we've already asked the officers to prepare a budget based on the 5.5%. It's a lot easier to say tonight to the officers, please prepare a budget at a lower rate increase than it will be to make that decision afterwards. So I encourage my fellow elected members to vote against the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Councillors, we have had 3 speakers for, and we're going to have 3 once this debate is wrapped up. Now, we're going to have to move on because we have an ABF starting at 6:30 and we need to wind up. If you feel you need to debate this for longer, we can adjourn the meeting and continue after the ABF. Or if you feel that we're prepared, we've had 3 for, 3 against, well, we're going to have our third for and 3 against, so we've had a very even debate. Can we proceed with closing this debate? Are you prepared to do that?
May I just have a question, Madam Mayor, and it's about
question?
the process. If we vote against the officer recommendation, what happens then?
Director Tuffin?
There wouldn't be a decision. We'd be looking to call another special council meeting to get a decision. We couldn't act without council's endorsement.
Madam Mayor, I'd like
Councillor Woodall?
to propose an adjournment. Given there's been a number of speakers against, I feel it would be preferable to attempt an amendment to the 5% increase rather than potentially vote against the whole officer recommendation and have to have another special meeting. I'd rather it's resolved tonight. So I'd propose we adjourn until after the ABF so that an amendment can be moved and decided on. I don't think it'll take long, but...
Okay, then is there agreement around the table that we should continue this after the ABF? If there is, I will adjourn the meeting. Is everybody agreeable? Do you prefer to go to a vote? We'll need to have a mover and seconder. Yeah, procedural motion. Okay, Councillor Woodall moved, seconded. Councillor Green. All right, we'll need to go to the vote. So if you agree with adjourning the meeting, okay, we're just setting the vote up. If you agree with adjourning the meeting till after the ABF, we will do that with the green vote. If you don't agree, you're voting red. And that means we have to go to wrap up the debate and vote on this motion. Councillor Spanbrook, what is your vote?
Support.
Green, okay. It's carried 10-2. Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned and we're going to start the ABF. I now declare the May 2026 Agenda Briefing Forum open at 6:37 and welcome to all those in attendance. I now invite Councillor Green to read the acknowledgement to country.
The City of Melville acknowledges the Bibbulmun people as the traditional custodians of the land on which the city stands today and pays its respects to the Whadjuk people and elders past, present and future.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I draw your attention to the disclaimer on the screen. The affirmation of civic duty and responsibility on the screen. The advice of audio-visual live streaming and recording on the screen. The purpose of the agenda briefing forum on the screen. Item 2, attendance and apologies. We have the following councillor attending electronically with my permission. Councillor Spanbrook. Are you still there, Councillor Spanbrook? Please respond.
I am. Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. No councillors are providing an apology for this evening. And we have the following councillors on approved leaves of absence, and that's Councillor Spanbrook and Councillor Ross. Item 3, declarations by members. We now move on to declarations by members. Are there any declarations by members who have not read and given due consideration to all matters contained in the business papers presented before the meeting? Nil. Declarations by members who have received and not read the elected members' bulletin? Nil. 4, announcements by the presiding member. Approved deputations. 2 deputations have been approved for tonight's meeting from Miss T. Barrow of Mount Pleasant and Miss S. Pape and Miss K. Horn on behalf of the Adderdale Scout Group. Both are in relation to item E2690, approval to demolish the Adderdale Scout and Baden-Powell Girl Guide facilities. And I'll call you forward prior to discussion on the item to make your deputation to council. Approved written submissions. Additionally, 1 written submission has been received from Mr. G. Smith of Gardenia in relation to item UP 26110, proposed amendment to local planning scheme 6 to rezone lot 40 Davis Crescent, Gardenia from residential 40 to residential 5. Disclosure of interest. Can the head of governance please advise if there are any disclosures of interest for this evening?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, no disclosures have been received for tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Ms Newman. Are there any further disclosures from elected members? No further disclosures. We move on to public question time. I advise 15 minutes is allocated for the public question time. Each questioner will have 2 minutes to ask their question and any other follow-up questions. Please be respectful, and if you are going to ask a question, and please submit that question in writing to us. There are notes, papers you can fill in, forms you can fill in just in the public gallery area. Okay, so now public question time. I now declare public question time open at 6:40. Are there any questions? Please come forward. State your name and suburb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is Esther Cole. I'm from Melville. I'm coming here tonight to ask about the Reconciliation Action Plan. I do so because I am a non-Aboriginal person and because the council's plan asks white people or non-Aboriginal people to step up and do the heavy lifting. So in the Reconciliation Action Plan, it states that First Nation voices should influence decision making.
Can I just ask you, is this item on the agenda?
No.
No, it's not. Unfortunately, you're not able to ask those questions that are not on the agenda at this meeting.
Okay.
You need to ask it at the next meeting of council. I will ask Head of Governance to respond.
Sorry, what was that, Madam Mayor?
I'll ask Head of Governance to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. At the agenda briefing forum, we can only have public questions that relate to the items on the agenda. Any other questions can be asked next week at the ordinary meeting of council.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions on the agenda items tonight? If there are no further questions, I will declare question time over at 6:42. Item 7, awards and presentations. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Item 8, applications for new leave of absence. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Item 9, confirmation of minutes. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Item 10, new business of an urgent nature. There is no new business of an urgent nature. Item 11, identification of matters for which meeting may be closed. No items or attachments have been identified as confidential for this evening. Item 12, petitions. The item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Item 13, adoption of recommendations en bloc. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Item 14, I'll bring forward item E2690, approval to demolish the Adderdale Scout and Baden-Powell Girl Guide facilities for the convenience of those making deputations. E2690, approval to demolish the Adderdale Scout and Baden-Powell Girl Guide facilities. Ms T. Barrow, will you please make your way to the microphone to make your deputation? You will have 10 minutes to speak with a further 5 minutes for elected members to ask questions. Thank you. Could you turn your microphone on, please? Is it working?
Is that on? Yep. Madam Mayor, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Tracy Barrow. I am the chairperson of the Whalen Bay Sea Scout Committee, and I'm also a resident in Melville. I stand before you. Who do I talk to move the slides on? Next slide. Thank you. I stand before you not just on behalf of a Scout group, but on behalf of a community, one that values history, connection, and the development of our young people. Today, I'm asking you to reconsider the proposal to demolish our guide hall, located at Baden-Powell Reserve. The hall was built by members of the community in the 1960s. Many of those families still live in the city of Melville, and their children or their grandchildren partake in activities in the hall. Just in the last year, Whalen Bay Sea Scout Group have had over 100 families involved in scouting, many of them with a long history themselves or through their families with the movement. Next slide. This building is more than timber and walls. It is a place where generations of young people have learned resilience, leadership, and responsibility. Next slide. It is where children who may struggle at school find confidence, where teenagers learn to lead, where families gather, where volunteers give of their time, and where community bonds are formed. Removing this hall removes one of the few remaining spaces where young people can grow into capable, community-minded adults. Next slide. The Scouts who meet in this hall don't just benefit themselves, they benefit the entire community. They volunteer at local events. Next slide. They support the emergency services. They participate in environmental projects, and they learn the values of service and citizenship. Next slide. These are the young people who will become our future teachers, small business owners, and community leaders. When we take away their space, we take away the foundation that helps shape them. Next slide. Scouts is divided into 5 age sections. Currently, the 2 older sections, the venturers, aged 15 to 18, some of whom are in the audience today, and this slide is actually taken in the guide hall a couple of months ago when they were doing a MasterChef mystery box evening. Next slide. And the rovers aged 18 to 25 use the guides hall and its facilities weekly. Next slide. The guide hall, along with the 2 other Scout halls, also serve as a vital community meeting place. It's used for meetings, support groups, dancing, church, exercise, and other local initiatives, with over 60 different groups regularly using the halls. the halls provide cost-effective places for our local communities to meet and hold their sessions. In the last year, excluding the time that the guide hall was used by our Scout group or visiting Scout groups, it has been hired for over 700 hours to over 18 groups who provide services to the community. Next slide. The halls are currently maintained, cleaned, and managed by the volunteers and the Scout community, with only major issues being escalated to the City of Melville for assistance. Without this community, the hall fees would probably more than double, impacting hundreds of families and community groups that meet here. Next slide. The funds raised by the guide hall rental are also all used in the support of the Scout community and keeping all of our halls in good working order. Next slide. Scouting provides a safe, inclusive environment for young people from all backgrounds and abilities. In a time where social isolation is rising, the hall is one of the few places where young people can disconnect from their screens and connect with each other. The City of Melville has stated in its motion that asbestos is present in the guide hall with safety and health risks, and that it has been vacant for the past 12 months. It is asking councillors to demolish the hall as the safest and most cost-effective option. Council conducted an audit and an extensive report in 2021 on the asbestos cement materials used in the building, and Scouts have had input from a public and environmental health consultancy, as well as from an architect who has read the reports and made a site visit. His opinion is summarised in the report that should have been distributed to all of you. And I just want to read and tell you a little bit about the report. So in the report that was conducted in 2021, there were 6 findings in the report, only one of which was high with immediate action being required. The other 5 were all deemed to be a low risk. When the architect did the site visit last week, he said, upon completion of the ID5 remediation, which is the high issue one, which is the meter box in the guide hall, and issuance of a clearance certificate, the site risk profile will reduce to entirely low risk, and all remaining asbestos-containing material can be managed in situ with routine inspection and maintenance controls in place. He also continues, although there are several small items requiring some maintenance, the overall condition of the hall is considered good and serviceable for its age. So he agrees that maintenance is required in the hall, especially in the meter box, but disagrees with the claim that demolition is either required or in fact recommended. The second point in the motion is that the hall has been vacant for the last 12 months. The statement needs to be corrected. As I said earlier, the hall and its facilities are used by 2 of the Scouting sections weekly, as well as serving as a much-loved and used community hall. In the last year, 18 different groups have been regularly hiring the hall. Council are urging you to demolish the hall as the safest and most cost-effective option. I challenge that the maintenance the architect suggested, along with keeping the hall, are actually the safest and most cost-effective for the entire community. Once a community asset is gone, it is gone forever. Rebuilding that sense of belonging is far harder than preserving the space that already provides it. Before we even consider demolishing the building, we need to give the Scout community and the greater community who use and built the hall the opportunity to agree what will replace it or find alternate solutions for funding. Next slide. I urge you to consider the long-term impact of this decision. Supporting Scouts is not simply supporting a youth organisation. It is supporting a safer, more resilient, stronger community. It is supporting the development of young people who will grow up to contribute, to lead, and to care. Next slide. Councillors, I ask you to vote no to the demolition of the guide hall. Protect the space, protect the opportunities it provides, and protect the future of the young people and the greater community who rely on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now there's an opportunity for elected members to ask questions. Are there any questions? Councillor Barber.
Thank you for your excellent presentation, Ms Barrow. May I call you Tracy? I guess, yes, you're right. We've been told by the city and that the asbestos is not safe, and they're concerned for the safety of the Scouts and Girl Guides. I did note you had a picture of a wheelchair, and I certainly wouldn't be putting, and obviously there's steps there so he can't, but, and even the dancing, the fear is that kids will be rambunctious, hit the wall, break the wall. That sort of thing is what we're told is the city is concerned about. It doesn't concern you that the kids are in there doing kids' stuff and the potential for bashing into those walls and therefore damaging the integrity and releasing asbestos fibres?
Ms Barrow.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. I think the Scouts take their guidance from the experts, and the experts and, in fact, the regulations for asbestos safety state that asbestos-containing materials are safe unless they show elements of weather. We've just had the hall investigated, and there is an issue. It was identified in 2021 with the meter box that there is asbestos and that is a high risk. It definitely needs to be remediated. But the rest of the asbestos is, the term is encapsulated and is deemed by, not by Scouts, but by the professionals to be safe.
Councillor Barber.
May I have a follow-up question? Thank you, Tracy. And just another thing, and it's just a brilliant space at Baden-Powell Reserve, there's no doubt about it. However, there are, I think, 3 buildings there. And so I suppose the question arises, and look, I for one would love to keep the Girl Guide Hall, but I am a bit worried about the asbestos. I don't know if the city's got plans to replace that building, but devil's advocate, I'm saying you've still got 2 buildings there. Why do we need a 3rd building? Can you not do with the 2 buildings and the wonderful play space? What's your answer to that?
Ms Barrow.
Thank you, Councillor. The guide hall is used. We've obviously got times of the week when there's a high demand for our facilities. And those are the times that we're using all of the halls at the same time. So on the premises in Baden-Powell, there is a cub hall with toilets and there is a guide hall with toilets. The other buildings are sheds and do not have toilets. So the property basically gets divided into 2. The cub hall with its toilets, which is very high demand, and basically you battle to get a slot there. And then there is the guide hall. So the guide hall is used for the whole rest of the property, and it's the only other set of toilet facilities on the property. So the usage has definitely dropped off in the last 6 months because we've been told that the hall is being demolished. But before that, it's regularly used. And yes, we can do without it, but our revenue will suffer and the community groups will suffer who can't find other spaces.
Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Tracy. You just mentioned earlier that there was an issue with the meter box in 21. Was that the first time that having asbestos in the guide hall was alerted to you?
Ms Barrow.
Can I defer? When were we first notified of asbestos in the guide hall?
When we received the council report in June 2025.
We received the council report in June 25.
And And just to follow up, Madam Mayor, please.
Councillor
So
Spanbrook.
when you were advised of that in 2025, were you advised then for no more activity to be there in the hall at all, or you were just able to continue until, of course, it gets to the demolishing stage?
My understanding is we were advised that the hall was being demolished.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just to confirm, so
Yes.
you were not advised by officers due to the asbestos, the potential dangers of it, not to use the hall at all from that period?
No, we were not.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor McGoldrick.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I want to thank and acknowledge Ms Barrow for your presentation. And I'm noticing that there's a lot of children or students in the class, and I know that they'll be studying persuasive texts in their writing, so that's a marvellous example of a persuasive text, and thank you for the community you've brought along tonight. I was just going to quickly ask if you've got a relationship with any other Scout or Guide or Cub or Rover groups, assuming that the decision's made that to demolish. Do you have any other networks, or would there be anywhere else you could share spaces locally?
Ms Barrow.
We haven't investigated that. It would obviously become an issue for the greater Scouts in WA to help us overcome that, but it's not something that we've explored at this stage.
Yeah. And a follow-up, if I may, the space around the buildings, can you just describe the significance of that location briefly for your community and the advantages of having that? From my opinion, it's quite isolated and discreet. Is there a benefit to having that location and keeping your buildings? Thank you.
Ms Barrow.
The benefit of the Baden-Powell Reserve is that it's this beautiful space where one of the slides I showed you was the kids building veggie gardens. They have Nerf bullet fights. They have water fights. One of the most amazing things, and it's the slide I left up for the longest, is campfires. When we're in fire season, it's the most moving thing. I didn't include all the photos of the food they cook because most of it's inedible. But campfire evenings are just the most amazing experience for these kids, because for a lot of them, that's the first time that they're getting to do something like that in an urban setting. So it's an amazing space to grow the kids.
Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much for the presentation. I should disclose that I used to go to Scouts in that very area, actually, so it does bring back memories for sure. I just was interested in the architect's report that was provided, I believe. I was particularly interested that the architect appeared to be from Albany, or the firm was based in Albany. I just wondered if you could shed some light, I guess, on why that particular architect was selected to do the report, and also if you'd be able possibly to share with Council the brief or the instructions that were given to that architect. Thank you.
Ms Barrow.
So the short answer is that he was available. He was in Perth and he was available, and we were able to ask him to give us an assessment on whether this was something that we needed to let pass. So he went along and had a look at a site inspection for us. The brief was purely that we had been told that the guide hall needed to be demolished because it was no longer safe. Could he please give us an assessment as a professional whether this was the case or not?
Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question, and thank you for your presentation, and again, thanks to all the Scouts in the room. I just want to follow up on Councillor Spanbrook's question around when you were told, when were you told that the city contained, the city,
The guide hall.
the guide hall contained asbestos and that you would have to leave the building? I thought it was contained in the report, but I haven't brought my glasses, so I can't really see properly what I'm reading. What month was it? Was it a while ago? Because I know that the lease hasn't been renewed because of the asbestos. Is that right? Or is that the wrong question to ask?
Ms Barrow?
The report was conducted in 2021 when I believe these findings were established. It was verified again last week by the architect, but as a Scout group, we only received the report in June 2025.
Councillor Wheatland?
Sorry, and so since then, has your lease not been renewed and you haven't been using that space? Is that correct?
We have been using the space because it's the danger area is contained in a meter box. So the space is still safe to use. It just does need to be remediated. But obviously with our communications with our community groups, when we say to them, we've been told the hall's about to be demolished, they say, oh, well, we want to go somewhere else. So we have been shifting people slowly because we don't want to disrupt them.
Councillor Wheatland?
Thank you, and thanks for that. I got confused when with Councillor Barber's questioning about kids like running through walls. So, but is there a Sea Scouts group that still operate in Applecross? Is that Whalen Bay?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I have to wait for Madam Mayor to...
Yes, Ms Barrow. That's for the purposes of the audio.
The Whalen Bay Sea Scout group has got 5 age sections. So the Cubs, the Venturers and the Rovers all meet at Baden-Powell Reserve. The Scouts meet on the Strand at Applecross because they're predominantly sailing. So that's the other Sea Scout group. There is another Sea Scout group in Como on the other side of the river.
Are there Councillor York?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. You mentioned that I think that fees might have to double for the Scout members. I'm just wondering roughly what is the range of fees at the moment to be a Scout?
Ms Barrow?
So thank you for the question. For clarity, the Scout fees are not doubling. The hall hire fees would increase because at the moment, the cleaning and a large majority of the maintenance, for example, in the Cub Hall, the fridge stopped working. We put a new fridge in the kitchen for all the community groups to use. So those things would be passed on to hall hires where now they're absorbed through those fees. So this is not an impact on the Scout fees.
Councillor York?
This question might be more for Director Coden. And you probably won't be able to answer it, but I'm just wondering if we do have a ballpark figure on how much the repairs would cost if we were to look at repairing the power board that's been identified as an urgent repair.
I think we're getting to officer questions. It's probably best if we just let the officers answer the questions rather than Ms Barrow. Thank you. Are there any further questions particularly pertaining to her deputation? We need to wrap up because we have exceeded our 5 minutes. So thank you very much, Ms Barrow. I think we need to move on to officers' question.
Thank you.
I apologise. We do have one more deputation to go before we start questioning officers. So our next deputation is from Miss S. Pape and Miss K. Horn. Will you please make your way to the microphone to make your deputation? You will have 10 minutes to speak and a further 5 minutes for elected members to ask questions. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. My name is Stacey Pape and I'm the Group Leader of Adelaide Scout Group. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight regarding the future of the Adelaide Scout Hall and the discussion surrounding the proposed demolition of community facilities at Baden-Powell Reserve. I would like to begin by saying that this deputation is not about resisting change for the sake of it. It is about advocating for the long-term future of youth development, community connection, and the preservation of a local community infrastructure that still holds significant value and purpose. Slide, please. Since stepping into the group leader role at the beginning of 2026, our leadership team has worked incredibly hard to rebuild and re-energise Attadale Scout Group after a difficult period. Slide 2, please. In just a short amount of time, we have seen genuine and measurable growth across all our sections: Joey Scouts, Cub Scouts, and our Scout section. Next slide, please. At the end of Term 4, 2025, the group had approximately 8 youth members. Today, we have grown to more than 33 active youth members across multiple sections, with additional families currently at our inquiry stage. We have seen increased youth attendance, growing inquiry numbers from local families, renewed volunteer interest, and significantly higher engagement through community events, social media, and local partnerships. Families once again are talking positively about scouting within the Attadale community, and there is now a visible energy and momentum surrounding the group that has been absent for some time. Importantly, this growth reflects more than just membership numbers. It reflects renewed trust from local families, stronger community visibility, and increasing demand for affordable structured youth programs within the Attadale area. Slide 4, please. Over recent months, we have delivered activities including community Anzac involvement, outdoor adventure programs, hikes, campfire nights, environmental activities, leadership development opportunities, and family engagement activities. What is becoming increasingly clear is that the group is not shrinking, it's rebuilding. Attadale Scout Hall should therefore not be viewed simply through the lens of a historical decline, but through the very real evidence of current renewal and future community potential. This is why the current discussion regarding demolition is deeply concerning. Slide 5. The Attadale Scout Hall is not simply an ageing building, it's a community youth infrastructure. It represents decades of local youth development, volunteerism, leadership training, outdoor education, and community connection. For many local families, Scout Halls are one of the few remaining affordable and accessible community spaces dedicated specifically for young people. Whilst we are currently operating from an interim facility in Palmyra, I want to make it very clear that this space simply allows us to continue delivering scouting programs while the uncertainty surrounding the future of the Attadale site remains unresolved. Our home has always been, and we believe should continue to be, the Attadale Scout Hall. Slide 6, please. The interim site has however highlighted something very important: what scouting can achieve when provided with adequate and a functional space. The increased outdoor area and flexibility of the site have allowed us to begin planning for future growth in ways that were previously difficult. As a growing Scout group, we are looking beyond simply holding meetings. We are building a sustainable, long-term youth program that supports children and young people through confidence building, resilience, teamwork, leadership development, and meaningful community participation. That includes space to accommodate growing youth members, safe outdoor areas, opportunities for indoor and outdoor programming, dedicated fire and bushcraft facilities, and the ability to conduct overnight camps on site. These are not unrealistic ambitions. These are normal and important parts of modern scouting programs that help young people develop resilience, teamwork, confidence, and practical life skills. Scouting is one of the few organisations where young people can still safely experience activities such as campfires, outdoor cooking, overnight camping, leadership development, and environmental education in a structured and supervised environment. Next slide, please. Young people thrive when they have stable and identifiable community spaces where they feel safe, connected, and supported. Scout halls are not simply venues, they become places of belonging, identity, and growth. Slide 8, please. Once community youth infrastructure like Scouts halls is demolished, it's incredibly difficult and often impossible to replace. The long-term impact is not simply the loss of a building, it is the gradual loss of opportunities for future generations of young people. We acknowledge and appreciate the challenge Council faces in balancing infrastructure decisions, community expectations and long-term planning. However, we believe decisions involving youth infrastructure deserve particularly careful consideration because of their lasting impact on future generations. Next slide, please. I respectfully ask Council to recognise that the Adelaide Scout Group is now in a period of positive growth and renewal. This is precisely the wrong time to make irreversible decisions about removing youth infrastructure before that growth has had the opportunity to fully mature and establish its long term. Tonight, I respectfully ask Council to genuinely consider the long-term value of preserving and supporting community youth infrastructure for the Adelaide Scout Group. We are not asking Council to invest into decline. We are asking Council to recognise and support visible community renewal, growing youth engagement, and a positive future for local young people. Next slide, please. We also understand that significant financial decisions must be made regarding the future of the site. However, if the estimated demolition costs are approximately $70,000, we respectfully ask whether those funds could instead become the starting point for a staged restoration and renewal approach for the Adelaide Scout Hall. Rather than removing community youth infrastructure, this could provide an opportunity to work collaboratively with Council, Scouts WA, and potentially state and federal funding avenues to explore practical long-term improvements and upgrades to the facility. We believe this approach would not only preserve an important community asset, but also demonstrate investment into the future of local young people and community wellbeing. Final slide, please. Thank you. Adelaide Scout Group is growing. Families are responding positively. Volunteers are stepping forward. Young people are benefiting. And we believe the future of scouting within Adelaide remains strong. Adelaide Scout Group wants to return home. Thank you for your time tonight. I will hand over to Karen from Friends of Baden Powell Reserve.
Thank you, Stacey. We've adopted the Attadale Group, the Friends of Baden Powell Reserve have. Madam Mayor, Councillor, CEO and staff, on the 19th of May, your approval is being sought for the demolition of the Guide Hall at Baden Powell Reserve and the Scout Hall at Attadale. These buildings were built and paid for by parents of Scouts and Guides in the 50s and 60s on special inner reserves planned under the Garden Suburb Scheme as places for children. These buildings are early Western Australian heritage. The irony here is that if neither building is demolished, there is immediately funds for the roof replacement for Attadale. The city has a principle of sustainability. Demolishing useful halls does not meet these criteria. Councillors, if the roof on your house had leaks and your bathroom needed updating, would you demolish your house? Effective Scout groups need homes of their own, not shared community spaces. The halls are their homes, their storage facilities and their classrooms. The land on which they sit is their safe camping place for small children. The Attadale Scout Group need councillors to vote no to demolition. This will give certainty and they can seek philanthropic funding for their roof and repairs. For the Guide Hall at Baden Powell Reserve, there is no legislative requirement to demolish buildings containing asbestos. It is being done because of council policy, which can be adjusted if the city has the will to do so. There is no urgency for the demolition, as Tracy's report and that of the City to the Scout Association that was received by the Scouts here in 2024 show. Providing the city meets its maintenance obligations, there can be no liability. The Whaling Bay Group at Baden Powell Reserve would like to continue using this building and request a 3-year or longer delay to the demolition, or until adequate ablution blocks and storage facilities can be built. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms Horn. Are there any questions from the elected members? Councillor Green.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question was for Stacey Pape. We've been informed that you're not able to enter the building now with the heavy water tanks holding the roof down, that sort of thing. I'm just wondering whether you are utilising the space outside at the site at all at the moment.
So it makes it really hard to utilise. So we do have the storage sheds, which are jam-packed full at the moment with moving. So we do have access to the sheds. The use of campfire, basically we cannot do unless we get toilets in for the events that we hold there. That's then obviously either a cost to either the city or to obviously our scout group, which we obviously wouldn't be able to follow. So yes, for storage, but for actual youth engagement, no.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barber.
Thank you to both ladies. Karen, just such a passionate advocate for the Friends of Baden-Powell. You do a great job. And Stacey, I've got to commend you as the new Adelaide Scouts leader. You're doing an awesome job. So my question, got a couple of questions. The first one is, I think, Karen, you might have said this, no trouble getting a philanthropic donation for the roof for the Adelaide Scout Hall. How do you know that? And I think we're talking over about $150,000. So
Okay.
can you elaborate?
We'd like to try. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We'd like to try.
All right, thanks. And the second one possibly is for you, Stacey. I know the city were instrumental in finding you a temporary home, and I believe you're sharing a great facility in Palmyra. Why would you not consider staying there, being that it seems to be working out well?
Look, we've run 2 sessions. So we started on Monday, so our Joeys attended for the first time on Monday. Our Cubs are currently there doing a campfire. The space is okay. It allows for scouting to happen. What it doesn't allow is for huge growth. So capacity is 50 at any one time. Based on our numbers, we want to be having more Joey Scouts, more Cub Scouts, more Scouts. We want to have a Ventura unit, and we ultimately want to have a Rover unit. If we were to have joint nights, that space does not allow for that to happen, because we would probably more than likely have more than 50 adults and youth combined in that space. So yes, it allows us to scout. Yes, it gives me a green space. I love the space, but ultimately when I speak, now remembering I've been in this role for 8 weeks. I have spent a lot of time speaking to family members, to ex-scouts, to scouts that scouted there 25 years ago. They want to go home, you know, and so for me, I have a job to do for these guys. That's what I've got to do. So yes, it allows me to scout. Does it allow me to camp overnight? No, it doesn't. Does it allow me to do a campfire and leave that space there all the time? No, I've got to put the campfire away every night. You know, so we're down there doing campfire tonight. We have to, put water on it, put sand on it, wait for it to cool down, pack it away, put it in a shed. You know, we can do all that up at our hall. That's what these guys want. That's what the youth want. It's what the parents want. I think it's what the community wants.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much for the presentation. I think there was a comment made about having, you know, a dedicated facility. And one of, I guess, the big issues currently facing all levels of government is single-use facilities and the cost that the whole community bears in terms of, you know, council rates effectively and taxes to maintain single-use facilities. And I mean, I'm sure you're aware, City of Melville, there's a lot of old facilities that were built by parents or groups back in the 50s and 60s. They're all sort of getting to that point of either replacement or restoration in some cases. So I'm just wondering, you know, given all that, would you be open to having a shared space, which effectively you are, I understand now, but, you know, going forward, just looking at the number of facilities we have and how hard it is, I'm sure every club would like a single-use facility, but just with the impact that would have on costs for the city, would you be open to potentially sharing a facility as a long-term home?
I've never said that I want a single-use facility. I'm probably one of the biggest advocates in Scouting and in Scouting WA to have multi-use facilities. Scouting happens afternoons or weekends. You know, why would we leave these spaces vacant during the day when community can access these spaces? The Adelaide Scout Hall offers that, and we'll continue to offer that if we can get back in there. And we want it to be a hub for community to use. I think from conversations I've had, it used to have like yoga groups in there. I think there were dancing groups in there at one stage. Why can't we keep doing that? We're not asking for a single use. We don't want it just for Adderale. We want it for the community. And I think that's what people have to understand. Please don't think this is, we want to just get in there, lock the gates and just let it be for scouting. That's never been our intention.
Thank you. Councillor Wheatland.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much, both of you, for your presentation. It's been an absolute pleasure coming down to visit you in Palmyra. Look, I'm not sure if you're aware that our youth strategy just completed in 2025, and they went out for consultation last year, and the consultation closed at the end of last year. Regardless of the decision that is made here, whether we save and rescue your building, I think there's an ongoing conversation that you guys should be having with the city about a dedicated youth space, a youth hub, because that's one of the directions. Would you guys be open to that in the future? And youth is defined as 12 to 25. I note the age of some of these young leaders in the room. It could be an opportunity for them to get involved too and have their say on what the future looks like for Cubs and Scouts and Guides. Is that something that you'd consider as well as?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's a yes and a no. So our programs are 5 to 25. So that's our job. We start at 5. They're banging down the door at 5, actually. So for us, yes, having a space possibly, but what that looks like in the fact of, is it to then have more Scout groups in that space? I'm going to say no. It would not work because you're then looking at an amalgamation of Scout groups. We all run our own programs. We have our own programs that we write, and it's based on what our youth want for Adderale. Wayland Bay would do things completely different to the way we do them. And that's part of having, creating that place. So in essence, I'm probably going to say no. But I think there would have to be further discussion on what that is sort of looking like from a city's point of view. I think if it's going to be as trying to get more Scout groups in there, it would not work. But other youth organisations, it doesn't interrupt the times of Scouting. Yes, definitely. I'm not going to be against a youth hub, but as to how that works with Scouts would be interesting.
Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must also say thank you for the presentations. They were really quite informative and very helpful. So I'm just wanting to know, I'm quite sure throughout one of them, I think you said there are something like 18 user groups that were using the guide hall. So do you know where those, if that's the case, if I'm right, do you know where the user groups have now gone? Like, are they using other facilities? Or if you can provide some information on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Ms. Barrow.
So we have basically tried to shuffle the groups that are being displaced from the guide hall into the Cub hall next door or through to the Scout hall in the Strand. Some of the groups have had to change their times that they meet because we can't find space for them. And we have been working with some of the members of the City of Melville to find alternate homes for them if neither of those options works. And some have just said, we'll find it somewhere ourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions from elected members? Councillor McGoldrick.
Thank you very much, Stacey, and your team, and what you do for the community is honourable, and all your community, and we all applaud what you do. It's marvellous, and thank you for what you do. I was just going to get back to the actual space there in Adderale. It's quite isolated and not visually noticeable, and I'm wondering if the space there is a good location going forward. I'm thinking just in terms of working with youth and young people, it's probably best practice to have visible open line of spaces, and I'm just wondering if you've got any feedback from that. And also, I noticed some of the photos looked like a familiar place for me and my family at Adderale Playgroup, and I can still smell that nappy bin even today. And the most beautiful place. So 2 questions really. Firstly, do you think that Adelaide Scout facility is the best place, or whether a multi-purpose situation like Councillor Waddle was suggesting could be appropriate somewhere as spectacular as the Adelaide playgroup in Point Walter. Thank you.
Ms Pape?
Look, Adelaide Playgroup, definitely not. Obviously, that's where we were for the interim time last year before I took over. I think when I first went to the hall in Adelaide, I fell in love with it. Look, yes, there wasn't a lot of advertising about it. There, you know, you sort of drive past and you're like, oh, is that where it is? I think that comes down to, again, you know, when I make contact with my families who do an inquiry, you tell them where you are. You know, at the moment in Palmyra, I've got no signage. I literally stand out the front and I talk to people. I do think that the Adelaide Scout Hall is the best place. The outdoor space alone is phenomenal. But also from the small snippets that I have seen of the hall, minus the big water drums, it's amazing, you know, and I think having that seclusion option, the same as Baden Powell, is such a benefit to Scouting. There are not many groups in Scouting that actually have a space like that. So for me, I think the benefit is huge. I haven't had the luxury to actually run a Scout session there. So sadly, you know, for me, I've seen halls that are way worse condition. You know, so ultimately, you know, does a multi-use space work? Like I've said before, you would have to sort of have those consultations with Scouts WA, with the groups that it's going to affect, as to if that's going to work. And I think understanding what Scouting looks like for individual groups is very different. You have groups that have in excess of 150 youth members that are running 5 different nights. You know, how do you accommodate that for 2 or 3 Scout groups in this area? I don't think you can. Or you're asking for an amalgamation of Scout groups. We don't want to lose Scout halls or Scout groups.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from elected members? Councillor Panayiotou.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned earlier that you had since you've been the Scout leader only the last few months, there's been a significant increase. I've calculated just then about 400% increase. I guess in those few months, where do you see, what sort of interest are you gaining over the course of this period now, and where do you see it going, say, by the end of the year, if it continues that same sort of traction?
Yeah, look, I've got approximately, I think, 13 youth sitting at inquiry stage at the moment. Last Saturday, I came home to 6 alone inquiries on my computer after a weekend of redoing the Palmyra Kindy. So, look, my goal in February when I took over was to have 50 families by the end of the year. I want to kick that basically to the curb, and I want 70 to 90 families in there by the end of the year. And I will try my hardest to get that number in there, because there is a need for Scouting in this area. Even just general people walking past and they're like, oh, my daughter's only 4.5. Oh, my son's like turning 3. Cool, I've got a waiting list, let's go. You know, we are going to get these youth members in there. They're excited. Let's start to promote it. You know, and I was shocked to sort of see when I took over, I do get on social media quite a lot, and there was nothing about Adelaide Scouts. I have pounded it, I have promoted it, programs are out, you know, the youth and getting them involved from the grassroots level. You know, we're excited. We start a Scout unit this Thursday. It's their first night. They have been having to be joined with our Cubs. Yeah, this Thursday they get their own night. So it's exciting. We're going to grow it, and it's going to happen faster.
Thank you, Ms Pape, and thank you, Ms Horn, for the presentation tonight. That's the end of our elected members' question time to the deputies. Now, prior to discussion of this item, I advise that Councillor Panayiotou has submitted an alternative motion with notice on the matter. A copy has been distributed via the elected members portal and the City of Melville website, and will form part of the final ordinary meeting of council agenda to be distributed this Friday, the 15th of May. Mr Coton now will provide a short officer presentation. Thank you, Mr Coton. And Mr Coton is Director of Environment and Infrastructure. Thank you. And And he is joined by Ms Ward and Mr Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is a brief overview of the presentation or the item that will be presented to Council next week. So the reason for the report is to discuss the independent reports that we received, both for the Baden-Powell Girl Guide facility and for the Attadale Scouts. So the Attadale Scouts suffers from structural issues, whilst the Baden-Powell Girl Guide hall has asbestos contaminating materials. The key themes, as you well know tonight, was to demolish, as we feel it is the safest, most cost-effective option, avoiding the ongoing liability and the risk and exposure associated with these two sites. Next slide. So just to talk a little bit about the Attadale Scouts. So there is structural issues to the roof only. So we have a non-compliant roof at the moment. It is creating a risk to the community. So that's why in haste we had to move the Attadale Scouts from that location up to Attadale Playgroup. And since that time, they've now been moved to the old Palmyra Kindy. Demolition is the most cost-effective option. Renewal will only address partially some of the risks there at that site. However, you will note within the item that there are options available. So as with all types of projects of this nature, we run this through a risk assessment. And the risk assessment, based on the information that we receive from the structural engineer and associated with the management of the site, it came out with a residual risk rating of medium. So that then options were available to look at other items, other options rather than demolition. So the Scouts have been supported through the interim relocation with alternative facilities that are being progressed. So that is the Attadale Scouts summary. On to Baden-Powell. So there is extensive asbestos throughout the building, and I'm just noting if you can have a look at the picture or the photo on the right. So you can see there's external cladding, you have the asbestos panelling, and then you have the timber frame. So that is surrounding the building. So this building has over 400 square metres of asbestos. At the moment it is contained. So like Ms Barrow said, at the moment it is contained. It's only if it is disturbed. Throughout this building, if it is disturbed, there is friable asbestos. Now, when we talk about being disturbed, it's about those unforeseen circumstances. It's weather elements, it's vandalism, those types of things that we can't control and we cannot manage. It is about the amount of asbestos throughout this particular facility that we can neither remediate or remove safely. So it was discovered back in 2021, following the QED report, that demolition was recommended. The Girl Guides ceased operation at that site, and it was determined that demolition was the best option because remediation was not considered a viable option. It was then put into the next lease agreement, which was agreed to in February 2026. So that facility has actually been removed from the current lease agreement with the Scouts Association of WA. Just on to the next.
Perhaps if I could just add a few comments as well, and just in relation to the report that was circulated to elected members late this afternoon, which was the report by Roberts Gardner Architects. Staff only saw this afternoon as well. We weren't aware that it was being undertaken, but we have had a review of it. So I'm not aware if Roberts Gardner are licensed by the state government as asbestos assessors, but I guess irrespective of that, the consultant's report considers that the risks are manageable, but they didn't provide their risk assessment to the city, so we can't really sort of comment further on that, and they didn't provide any indication of the cost of that management either. But just in terms of the reasons why the city has identified it as being high risk, as Ms Ward pointed out, there's a range of risks associated with it. It is a building with extensive asbestos-containing material, with potential risks of vandalism, weather events, damage to walls, human error, etc., can have consequences in terms of reputational damage, financial implications, extremely serious health implications, legal action and health implications for surrounding neighbours as well. And so, as has been pointed out, if the material does become damaged and friable, the staff assess the likelihood of that occurring as possible, but the consequence, if it does occur, is catastrophic. And under the city's risk rating, that results in a risk to the city in the category of being a high risk. So that's why staff believe that it's a high risk, and acknowledging that the consultant's report says that it's a low risk and manageable. So, and there was also some comments in relation to communication with the group as well. It's important to note that the lease agreement is with Scouts WA, and so that's who we've been communicating with, and on some occasions some of that information hasn't been passed on, but we have been attempting to communicate with the local groups as far as practical.
Thank you, Director Coton. Okay, the time is finished for the officers' presentation, and now the councillors, if you wish to ask questions from the officers, who would like to ask a question? Councillor Green.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for, any of the three panellists. Yeah, I was just interested in the word friable. So could you sort of describe, so if you have, is there a distinction between firm, intact asbestos and friable asbestos? There is, and yeah, just the extent of what has been regarded as friable in the building as the second question.
Thank you, Councillor. The friable asbestos at Baden Powell is located within the distribution board and within the vinyl flooring in the kitchen, and it's a higher risk if it's disturbed. There is a much higher risk of the fibres becoming airborne, where they can be inhaled.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Councillor York.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I was just reiterating my earlier question. Do you have any idea or ballpark figure as to what it might cost to repair those specific issues they've identified in the hall to fix them?
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Councillor. The distribution board has been tested as recently as March with airborne monitoring, and that passed that test. We didn't undertake the repairs because the plan was to do the demolition. At an estimate, the repairs for the distribution board would be about $15,000.
Councillor Wheatland.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, Director Coton has some response as well.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, through you. One thing I also meant to mention in regard to the consultant's report as well, it was based on the QED report of 2021. There was a more recent study undertaken by the city in 2025.
Councillor Wheatland.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just some questions I was asked late today. If the Scout Hall is demolished, the Adderall Scout Hall we're talking about, and the land isn't sold and the land is not used by the Scouts to rebuild, where will be their permanent home? Will that be in Palmyra, or we'll find them a new home? Or
Ms. Ward.
Two more.
Thank you, Councillor. That will be determined through the Scout review. So at the moment, we're trying to find an adequate interim facility, which was the Palmyra Kindy, until we can undertake a study, and at which stage then it will be determined what is the best location for Scouts.
Yes, Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If it's demolished and the land is not sold, it's probably to Mr. Coton, what will the land be used for?
Director Coton.
A decision hasn't been made on that.
Councillor Wheatland.
Thank you. Councillor Green, you got your mic on. If it's demolished, will the land be sold to fund other projects within the city?
Director Coton.
Oh, that's not being proposed.
Councillor McGoldrick.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm just noticing in those photos that the internal walls asbestos, I notice, is aluminium cladding on the outside of the building to protect and keep the asbestos internal wall linings. Would that be achievable, or at the end of the day, we're talking like many of our beautiful old classic beach homes up and down the coast made of asbestos? They're just complex now. They're getting to that age. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Councillor. The internal walls can be sealed with either fresh paint or with a PVA glue, but that would be considered a temporary option.
Perhaps if I could also add through you, Madam Mayor, just in relation to, it's not really practical. We haven't worked out a cost to remove the asbestos and rebuild it, because it's just simply not practical. Because if we're removing the cladding, remove the asbestos, we have to remove the cladding, and the timbers are all contaminated, so they'd need to be sealed. So we'd still end up with a contaminated building. It's just simply not practical to remove the asbestos. So we don't have a cost for that, because it's just, not practical.
Councillor Barber.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The Girl Guides exited the building in about 2021, and is that when we found them the place on Kitchener Road? Is that right? Or what happened to those people when they exited?
Ms Ward.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not sure is the short answer. So the closest Girl Guide facility is, of course, on Kitchener, but there is no records as to whether the Girl Guides were relocated to that. Our understanding is they simply disbanded.
All right, and has the city given any thought to what is going to be done in replacement if we do remove the Girl Guide Hall? What has the city given any thought as to what will go there?
Ms Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. We had brief conversations with the Scout group down at Wayland Bay, and they did indicate that toilet facilities was a high priority. At that stage, we said that we were happy and open to conversations around future facilities there.
Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In terms of the Adderdale Scout Hall, apart from the roof, which is obviously a serious issue, are there any other, ongoing maintenance issues with that hall? And also, just in terms of given its age, if the roof were okay and were not an issue, how much longer would we sort of expect that hall to be able to be, remain in place and to continue to be used before it had to be either refurbished or demolished and rebuilt?
Ms Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. In Australia, buildings generally have a design life of around about 45 years. And when I say that, it's a design life, which means that when you go to refurbish, there's a number of new codes that are introduced that means that it makes a refurbishment rather difficult. It doesn't mean that the building, that's when we say it's come to its end of its remaining life, and it's generally a design life as opposed to a structural life. The building down at Atterdale is in a fair condition. The brickwork is in a fair condition. If you were to put on a new roof, we would need to investigate whether that would trigger the NCC, the National Construction Code, and whether we would need to do further upgrades, and that could be around disability access and the like. So that's when, and often I think we've come to council quite a few times to say we could do a refurbishment and it will trigger all of these aspects that we need to upgrade, or you could demo and rebuild. And often it is more about the design life and how we could build a more efficient building for the same price as refurbishing. So I'm sorry, I think I talked in circles then, but...
Councillor Woodall.
I guess also what I was sort of trying to get at is is there the same urgency with the Adelaide Scout Hall compared to the girls' guides where there's, asbestos is a serious issue? Would it be an option to simply leave the Adelaide Hall as is, not spend any money on maintenance until the Scout review and the asset review is complete, and then make a decision as to what is the best path forward?
Yes, they do have different risks. So certainly the Baden-Powell Girl Guides is high risk as far as staff are concerned with the asbestos risk. This one, the Adelaide Scouts, has been assessed as medium risk, and there's 3 options that have been prepared, as Ms Ward outlined, which are in the report. So the first is demolition, which staff we're recommending. The second one is to undertake further investigations into the cost of the renewal of the roof, and if that would, what that would trigger in terms of additional work, and then bring that back to an EMES, and that's essentially Councillor Pani Otu's motion, and that will go before the staff recommendation. And the third option was just to do nothing and leave it till the Scout study has been done. So as far as staff are concerned, all those 3 options could be justified. So the urgency for the Adelaide Scouts isn't as significant as the Baden-Powell Girl Guides.
Thank you, Director Coton. Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Based on the recent independent report submitted by the Wetland Bay Sea Scout Group, all areas apart from the electrical mounting board cabinet were assessed as low risk. However, the city still considered the site to be the high risk. What is driving this significant discrepancy between the 2 assessments? Do you think it's simply because the independent report didn't consider the potential or unforeseen future risk scenarios, or is there any other factors involved? Thanks.
Ms Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that is spot on. So our QED report also, when they go out and assess the asbestos components in isolation and the way in which it's managed, and currently managed as in it's cladding or it's covered, it is a low risk. However, putting all of that asbestos together, we have over 400 square metres of asbestos in that facility, and our risk assessment looks at unforeseen circumstances, the age of the facility coupled with weather elements, vandalism. It is an isolated site. So we look at how it is managed, the oversight of it, its age and those unforeseen circumstances, and that's how it comes in. But individual components, because of the way in which it's been managed around the cladding and the protection, it is low at the moment. But combine that with the amount and the unforeseen circumstances, that's what kicks it into the high risk.
Councillor Pani Otu.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation there. But my questions are around the Adelaide Scout Hall. Now, we can only go by evidence, of course, and in relation to the 3 reports that you sent us, thank you for sharing that. And all 3 reports have all recommended roof replacement. All 3 reports have identified that the structure is sound and in good condition. And one report actually came out with a costing of the roof replacement. Without me quoting the figures now, that report was done 2 years ago. Do you see that being pretty much where we're going to be heading with regards to cost of roof replacement?
Ms Ward.
Am I allowed to quote that figure? Yeah, it was, 126,000, and that's full roof replacement. And
Thank you, Ms Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that we would just need to look at escalation costs on that, but that is a roof in isolation. So we would need to know whether that particular work triggers any other work. So that was my only concern. So that structural engineer has looked at that in isolation of when I go through a building permit and whether it triggers further upgrades, but it wouldn't be far off. That escalation is around about 5%, and then you need to add on project management costs. However, we would need to go back and investigate that, because I want to make sure that I bring council a figure that we can actually implement this project. And I am concerned that that cost is in isolation of not looking at what those types of works trigger for the overall building. Does that?
Perhaps also,
Director Coton?
Yeah, when the project was progressing a number of years ago, and Mrs. Ward will be able to provide the exact figure, but the group also wanted other upgrades such as air conditioning and things like that, and then that required power upgrades and things like that. So the cost, I can't remember exactly the figure for the cost, that was 660,000, so that was a couple of years ago, but that's the sort of thing that can be triggered, and so it's not as simple as just replacing the roof. Or may not be as simple as just replacing the roof.
Councillor Panayiotou, is that a follow-up question?
Yes, it is, Madam Mayor. Appreciate the what you said about the extra work, electrical work. My understanding was that the type of roof that's currently there has limited insulation. So, of course, once a new roof is being identified and of course, there'll be a better insulation properties and the requirement, would you see the requirement of adding three-phase for air conditioning really be non-essential and then leave it pretty much as it is with the new roof? Is that something you'd agree to or understand?
Director Coton?
That's probably the sort of information that we need to get some costs on and bring back to council. And I mean, the air conditioning is a good example actually, because as I think I might have mentioned to Councillor Panayiotou when we're out on site, you know, it's quite common for a community group to be happy with a facility, but then if there's a change of committee or new people come in and things like that, and then requests for upgrades come in down the track as well. So it could be, it could be a simple job, but there could be other things as well, and it's probably more appropriate for staff to go and investigate those things and bring it back to council through an EMES, as Councillor Panayiotou proposes, and then provide some clear direction to staff moving forward. Perhaps also just pick up on one of the other points, and Councillor Panayiotou is correct in terms of the reports identified the roof replacement, but the consideration of staff as well was looking at the city's all of the city's building infrastructure as well, and obviously a consultant's not aware of financial pressures facing the organisation and things like that. So, you know, balancing risk, service levels and costs. So that's some of the other considerations that staff have put into the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Wheatland?
Thank you. And look, I've got a question, but the question I was going to ask originally was answered so well by Rachel Ward to Councillor Hong. I just want to commend how much information you're giving us tonight, and it's really, it's not just statements, it's actually getting down into the nitty-gritty, so I just want to commend you for that. Secondly, I'm just trying to understand, I've forgotten my question. Oh, no. If we decide to support the alternate motion, I'm just curious as to how that will impact rates, and will it go through this financial year, or can we put it off till next financial year? Just some questions around that, please.
Director Coton?
So the intention of Councillor Panayotou's motion is that the money that was proposed for the demolition of the Attadale Scouts, some of that money would actually go towards an investigation to come up with some scoping and costs, and so staff estimate that might be about $10,000 to $15,000 of a consultant's time, so that money is already available. It would then come back to an EMES, which would inform future budget decisions. So the short answer is no, it wouldn't impact next year's rates, and then any decision in regard future work or rates would be something that would come back through the budget process.
Councillor Wheatland, follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for that. And so then the building will just sit in situ until that report comes back and we make a call?
Director Coton?
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor York?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Sorry if you could just confirm regarding the Attadale site that it is state-owned land and there isn't any mechanism for the city to sell it and obtain a financial return?
Ms Ward?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it is my understanding it is Crown Reserve. There is a provision under Section 152 to purchase land, but that would need to be a submission to the state government. And at the moment, they're not looking fondly on those particular submissions. Need to be in line with the public open space strategy, and the money would need to be returned back into other public open space.
Thank you. We have Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in relation to the cost for the potential cost for roof replacement and looking at that in itself, presumably the report that comes back will look at whether the roof replacement will trigger the National Construction Code. And if it did, I assume the cost escalation, we'd be looking at disability access, toilet facilities, etc., potentially talking about, I would assume, over $1 million or more, or hundreds of thousands at least. At that point, I guess the officers would present their opinion on whether it's even viable at that point. So that would all come back in the report to council if we go down that path.
Director Coton.
Yes, that's all correct, other than what's proposed is that we'll go to an EMES rather than bring a report back to council, and the EMES will then inform the budget process. So essentially it would come back to council for a decision as part of any future budget process. But we will bring back, when we come back to the EMES, we'll have all those things in there. That's the work that we're not sure about. What work will it trigger? What the exact scope will be, and so we don't want to give you a figure that it's going to be $150,000 to replace a roof and then find out that it's, you know, a lot more for all the other things.
Thank you. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. Does the city or the council have a risk appetite framework or risk appetite statement that outlines the level of risk that we as an organisation are willing to take on with regards to asbestos?
Mr. Yuditz, Director Corporate, yes. Sorry, Legal Governance and Risk. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. We do have an enterprise risk management framework, but a risk appetite statement is still work to be done with council. So until such time we've done that, we haven't established that from a council perspective.
Could I just ask a follow-up to that?
Yes, follow-up question, Councillor Robbins.
Thanks so much. So, Mr. Coton, I know you outlined at the start of your presentation some detail around the level of risk. So could you maybe explain how officers, in the absence of a risk appetite statement, how officers determined the level of risk that we're willing to accept with regards to asbestos in this situation?
Is that you? Director Yildiz.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Our enterprise risk management framework does have a risk analysis matrix that allows us to be able to determine the level of risk that is associated with any event that we're sort of considering. But the appetite itself, that's why it's come to a council for a council decision, because there's no guidance in regards to what level of risk council's appetite was willing to take on. So in the absence of that, hence why the decision has come to council to consider.
Councillor Panayiotou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You made a statement earlier about the lifespan of buildings in Perth being around 40 to 45 years. I guess when I look at, my question is, can we benchmark other similar facilities? For example, the Comscott Scout Hall, which was built in 1920. So it's well over 100 years old and still surviving, and it's an amazing attraction now that it's been kept. So I guess if we can have a look at existing buildings that were built with the same materials and come up with a reasonable conclusion about the rest of the structure.
Director Coton.
Yeah, we can bring some information back with the EMES. I think as Ms Ward said, like when it's talking about the 45 years, that's sort of like the design life, and I've sort of had some experience with scout halls that are very old ones as well, and the building's still standing, the structure is still good, but they do require regular renewal and refurbishment for universal access requirements, all those sort of things. So there's the sort of the design life in terms of functionality and things like that is different to the structural life. But yeah, certainly we can look at some other examples and bring them back to the MES.
Councillor Barber.
Sorry, might be a silly question. I hate losing our heritage. And I was wondering if instead of demolishing the Girl Guide Hall, could we move it and maybe put it at the end of one of our jetties so that it sits there like the University of WA boat shed thing? I don't think they use that. It was just a thought. Don't have to answer. And I just hope that because I quite like Councillor Penny-O'Too's alternate motion, and I would like to hope that the city officers do what they could to not invoke the National Design Codes. If there's something, we could just do a roof-for-roof sort of thing. Is that possible, Director Coaten?
Director Coaten.
If the work that's required triggers those requirements, we are obliged to undertake them. It's not something that we've got discretion over. Yeah, I'll perhaps leave it at that.
Are there any further elected members' questions? Councillor Green.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I was just wondering about the fact that the Baden-Powell Guides Hall has come out of the lease arrangement in February. I was just wondering what that does to liability, both for the city, but also perhaps for Scouts if the building continues to be used without a lease in place. So from a perhaps duty of care or a liability standpoint.
Director Yildiz.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Without lease, there's no tenure or access that is technically authorised to allow access to the building. On that basis, the user would take on all responsibility in regards to accessing the building because there's no legal terms or obligations that have been clearly articulated in regards to that use.
Yeah, and if it continues not, if it's sort of not being used for I guess it's purely a city-owned asset with no responsibility for the tenant, so to speak, I guess.
Director Yildiz.
Through you, Madam Mayor, without any authorisation to use the building or any permission to use the building, there'll be a twofold sort of process to consider. Why is it being currently used, under what sort of arrangements, and whether there is any authorisation for that, and whether the city has done anything to be able to manage that. So with the current situation where there is no lease or no licence or no authorisation that's provided, the expectation is the city will still have to manage the building, but the people who are using the building are doing it without any particular authorisation or under any legal obligation or any legal terms.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question on that. So how does the revenue structure work in terms of, when they're hiring out the hall? What happens in that situation when the lease ends? Thank you.
Director Yildiz. Director Tuffin.
Beg your pardon, Madam Mayor, could I please have the question again?
Yes. Through you, Madam Mayor, just around the whole hire revenue, because as we just mentioned that the lease was ended in February 2026. So how does the revenue structure then work? So when they collect the whole hire money, what happens to that revenue? Thank you.
Director Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not 100% clear, but generally all of our community leases require council's written permission to undertake other activities or to sublease community buildings as a general rule. In terms of who would have possession of that funds, I assume it would remain with the Scouts group at this point in time.
Are there any further questions from elected members? All right, thank you. We have reached the end of the officers' questions. So thank you very much. Director Coaten, Ms Ward and Mr Anderson. Okay, we are now moving on to M2677, Common Seal, April 2026. Oh. Did anybody hear? We'll just pause a moment while the gallery depart. We're adjourning for 5 minutes. The meeting is now reconvened. Thank you. We're on to item M2677, Common Seal, April 2026. Are there any questions from elected members? If not, we'll move on to item C26377, Investment Statements for March 2026. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, we'll move on to C26379, Statements of Financial Activity for March 2026. Any questions? If no questions, moving on to item C26378, Schedule of Accounts paid for March 2026. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, we'll move on to item C26380, Alternative Revenue Plan. Are there any questions? Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've noted that a couple of other local governments have a similar document to this one, or it might be slightly different, but some of them set a numerical target for the amount of money they're going to spend on, say, purchasing property, I think it is generally. Was any consideration given to that kind of thing for the city? Because I note the plan generally is quite broad in its objectives. Thanks.
Director Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, it wasn't, and that was a deliberate thing. We currently have $18.5 million in reserves for land and property investment. As you're aware, the decision to transfer in and out of reserves is an annual decision of council, and also, I guess, a longer-term proposition in terms of our long-term financial plan. So as one of the recommendations in this document is to look at our reserves and actually develop a reserve strategy so we can look at where we should be allocating funds to which area of need, I guess more strategically than perhaps possibly in the past.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Moving on to the next item, CD 2663, Leeming Recreation Centre Pre-Feasibility Study. Are there any questions? Councillor Robbins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. My question is about the arrangement with the Department of Education and their use of the facility. So has any discussion been had with the department about like a financial contribution towards their use of the city's facility, whether that be currently or in the future? And I guess the broader question is whether, because there seems to be, I guess, a lot of emphasis in the report that, you know, because the Department of Education uses the facility, we need to make sure that they can keep using it continually and that there's not sort of a gap in that time frame. So are they, in order for that, because obviously it costs the city more to do it that way, so are they providing a financial contribution to cater for that?
Ms Pickering, Director Community Development, or Mr Burton actually appears to be taking the microphone. Thank you.
Through the Chair, thanks Madam Mayor, and thanks for your question, Councillor Robbins. Early discussions have occurred. The intent is, so they're undertaking a business case on their own in regards to future facilities, in regard to whether or not they can develop them on their land. So we're looking to obviously do this process in parallel with that. They're unsure whether they can actually, there's something that's buildable on their land. As a result, if they align with our option and there's that shared use arrangement, yes, there would be an expectation that they would contribute, but it would also have to go through their business case process as well through the Department of Treasury.
Okay, Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a couple of questions, perhaps to Mr Burton or Director Pickering. The first question is, following this pre-feasibility study, what is the duration would the city be expecting that will come back to council And then I'll ask another question from there if I may, thanks.
Mr Burton?
Through the chair, should the officer recommendation be approved, we're anticipating would start the feasibility process as of the start of July 2026. And the expectation is that it'll probably take around 12 months, which includes the community engagement process.
Councillor Spanbrook?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Burton, because that was going to be my next question. I know following a few workshops and discussions that we have actually discussed, a few different forms of community engagement. So you anticipate that all taking place within the 12 months, and then once all that's collated, then you'll come back to council following that. Is that correct?
Mr Burton?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. The community engagement is inclusive of that overall estimated 12-month timeframe.
So just a question on the community engagement. What involvement will the council or elected members have with regard to how broad it is, or even the types of engagement, considering, with what the community is preferring?
Mr Burton?
Through the chair, the officer recommendation outlines the proposed methods of, at a high level of, I suppose, the engagement activities. There is an opportunity, council can have an overview of the more detailed community engagement plan, or we could ultimately work with council in a EMS or through ward councillors through that process as well to make sure they're kept up to date.
Just one last one, thanks, Madam Mayor. I should have been more explanatory. With the community engagement, I understand from feedback that I've received that there are people who have obviously worked during the day, so whether it be online, whether it be letterbox drops, or whether it would also be, like it has been put to me a few times, do I say like a town hall meeting, or perhaps, meeting in groups like you during the day and as well as the evenings. That way then it will be able to include, anyone and everyone who has an interest in taking part.
Mr Burton?
Yep, through the chair, we'd obviously look at a multiple range of engagement methods to collect that information. But yes, certainly, a town hall type activity or one or two of those is proposed. Obviously, we'd need to work out the detail to make sure we can capture as many people as possible through the engagement process.
Thank you. Are there any further?
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from elected members? All right, we're moving on to the next item. E26 Asset Management Strategy. Any questions? Councillor Robbins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a question about the total annual life cycle gap of approximately $8.18 million. How is it proposed that gap is closed? Will that be through work done in the long-term financial plan, or will we just be putting rates up to close that gap? Thank you.
Director Coton.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. It'll be a combination of things. There will be decisions of council. So the information is based on the previous long-term financial plan that went to council a while ago, and a fair bit more work has been occurring on that, as I've mentioned a few times at briefings on asset management strategy. The asset management strategy, it is a process of continual improvement and refinement. We're getting better information through our asset management plans in terms of the whole of life costs of our infrastructure, and that's informing the long-term financial plan. And a number of councillors here have undertaken the asset management training, and and as I've mentioned in the briefings, it's a matter of council balancing level of service and risk and cost. So all of those decisions input into that. So it would be a combination of perhaps it may be increasing rates, it may be deferring some capital projects, it may be changing levels of service, but they will all be decisions that will come through council in future.
Any further questions? Councillor Robbins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The strategy states that budgeting priority will be given to the maintenance and renewal of existing assets over new projects. The Leeming Rec Centre item that's on the agenda, the proposal there is to knock it down and rebuild. Is that an example of renewal, or is that considered a new project?
Director Coton.
That would be what I'd consider as being replacement. So there is an existing piece of infrastructure there, and it's more economical to demolish it and rebuild it than it is to actually renew it. It provides better whole of life costs and better value.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I've got a few other questions, but I'm happy to email them through if that's preferable.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Robbins. And we're all able to read your questions and receive those answers. Thank you. Any further questions from elected members? If not, we'll move on to E26-101, deferral of findings from Burke Drive Traffic Study Report. Any questions? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a question about the stakeholder engagement, the process. As the officers have said, this is going to be quite a polarising topic for the residents who use Burke Drive in Adelaide, and therefore I'm concerned that are we allowing enough time? We've deferred the findings already, and if I can just go through it with you, there's a 2-week opportunity for people to express an interest to register for a community workshop. So 2 weeks only for somebody to register for a community workshop. Then there's a community workshop on a day. My question is, where is that workshop? And then after the workshop, there's a further 2 weeks of a survey. And I would have thought it would have been better use of time to perhaps allow 4 weeks of stakeholder engagement, including a survey, culminating in a community workshop is what I would have thought. I'm worried that we're not going to capture all the users of Burke Drive in 2 weeks, is what I'm worried about. Because it's not just Adelaide who use Burke Drive, it's far and wide. So that's my first question. Could I have an answer to that, please?
Director Coton.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So yeah, it will be a combination of louder drops to people and other mechanisms and social media to alert people to the opportunity of the workshop. It's proposed to be in this building. Take on board your comments that perhaps people may need longer to register, but the intent is that people will register, and if they're unable to attend the workshop, they'll have an opportunity to provide feedback outside of that. But as pointed out, there are diverse views from people in the community, so we do want to make sure we capture them all, but we can certainly take on board the comment about a longer time period.
And just if I may follow up, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Barber.
And as I pointed out, Director, it's not just the people who live in Adelaide, it's who'll be affected. I'm thinking of the boat owners who are driving boats down to Point Walter. How are we going to capture their input? And is there going to be signage, for example, at the Point Walter boat ramp? Is there going to be signage on the Burke Drive dog park? This is it's going to be pretty huge. And the consequences could be, significant for the people of Adelaide. So I would really ask that we give due consideration to capturing a whole range of user input, and I'd love it if it was longer than a 2-week capture. Thanks.
Okay, I'll take it that was a comment. So are there any further questions? Councillor Panayiotou.
Yeah, just one. With this deferral, do we have any indication of timeline with regards to deferring?
Director Coton.
We'll get it back to council as soon as we can. We deliberately didn't put in a time when we would bring it back in the event that, the consultation and engagement took longer than planned. So I don't want to sort of make promises. We'd be sort of probably aiming for September, October, but I don't want to make a commitment and then have to write another report deferring it, but we'll certainly get it back as soon as we can.
Councillor Woodall.
Thank you. Would it be open to if council or a councillor or councillors didn't want to see any changes to Burke Drive, would it be open to us to simply not defer the item, just rather than have it sort of continually roll on, just to say the matter's dealt with, no changes required?
Director Curtin.
I wouldn't recommend that. So obviously, some work has gone into the analysis to date. There is also money on the draft 26-27 capital budget for some design work to occur as an outcome of this. So that wouldn't be a course of action that I'd recommend. I think it would probably end up causing us more problems than it solved.
Head of Governance, Ms Newman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Woodall, it does appear that there was a petition associated with this, so we would need to address the concerns raised in the petition through this process. Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, let's move on to the next item. UP 26-103, Draft Local Planning Policy 1.23, Requirements for Local Planning Scheme Amendments. Any questions? Councillor Robbins.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Could Mr Varelis please outline the expected cost of additional consultation that will be required as a result of the new policy? And then maybe secondly, why it was deemed that a policy was necessary and not just an internal operational process? Thank you.
Director Varelis.
Through the Chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Robbins. The primary additional cost would be letters to affected and considered appropriate residents for consultation. The process itself could readily be absorbed within the city's operating budget. And sorry, could you please remind me of the second question?
Thank you. Just why a policy was deemed necessary and not just an internal operational process.
Thank you. Through the Chair, it was considered appropriate to encapsulate this process within a policy for a number of reasons. One of those is to provide certainty to applicants and stakeholders to understand what the city's process would be for scheme amendments, but also should staff change within the city, ensuring that this process is captured. It's important that consultation occurs on a preliminary basis before council enters statutory processes for significant scheme amendments that could result in major built form or land use changes, so that process retains control at the council level and isn't necessarily always handed over to the Minister for Planning by entering a statutory process.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on this item? Moving to the next one, UP 26-110, Proposed Amendment to Local Planning Scheme 6 to rezone Lot 40 Davis Crescent, Cardinia from Residential 40 to Residential 60. Are there any questions? I think I missed something. Oh yes, we better go back to that. UP 26, 111, review of the Burragoon Melville City Centre Structure Plan, RFQ. Gate 1 scope endorsement. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, we'll go to the next item, which is UP 26-110, Proposed Amendment to Local Planning Scheme 6 to rezone. Are there any questions on this one? Pardon? Yes, I remind the Council that a written submission has been received and circulated. A copy will also be included in the notes of the meeting. Okay, we've reached the end of the reports. Motions with previous notice. Now we move on to motions with previous notice. 15.1, notice of motion. John Connell Reserve transplanting trees. Director Coton is available for questions. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, I'll move on to item 15.2, notice of motion, Marmion Reserve.
Yes, Madam Mayor, you didn't see me, hear me.
Pardon? Councillor Spanbrook, which item were you interested in asking a question on?
The John Connell Reserve planting. I just want to get clarification, if I can, with Councillor Green's motion, which certainly has relevance. I just want to check with the DEWA communication. Is that in addition to what the existing clearing permit is? What it currently is with regard to the offset area in Kenhurst Park, as Councillor Green does question for additional areas for planting, or is this just in case? Perhaps I should have actually contacted Councillor Green myself, but now that I've just thought of it, if the Director can answer the question, please.
Yes. Director Coton?
My understanding from Councillor Green, it is just that if in case it's needed.
If you can answer with a simple question without entering debate, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just point Councillor Spanbrook to the second last paragraph where it says this motion does not seek an immediate amendment to the clearing permit, as officers have advised this would likely cause delays at this stage. Yeah, so it's just preparing ourselves for potentially needing to perhaps amend talk to DEWA about possible amendments should there be an issue with things like failure rates of the tree planting, that sort of stuff.
Okay, thank you. All right, any further questions on this item to the Director? Okay, moving on to item 15.2, notice of motion, Marmion Reserve. A motion with notice has been received from Councillor Wheatland in relation to Marmion Reserve. This is being processed and will be circulated as soon as possible. So item 17 or 16, motions without previous notice. There are no motions without previous notice for this evening. Item 17, matters for which the meeting was closed to the public. There were no matters for which the meeting was closed to the public, and there were no decisions made while the meeting was closed to the public. So we reach item 19, closure. For the purposes of the notes, can the following councillor please confirm she is still in attendance? Councillor Spanbrook.
I'm in attendance, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. There being no further business, I declare the meeting closed at 8:44. Thank you very much. So let's pause for a moment. I now re-adjourn the meeting, the special council meeting regarding the rate setting, or the advertised rate setting. It's not the rate setting. So we have had a number of speakers. We've had 2 for, being Councillor Wheatland, Councillor Barber, 3 against, Councillor Woodall, Councillor Spanbrook and Councillor Robbins. Now we're, do we have a speaker?
Madam Mayor.
Councillor Barber?
I would like to foreshadow an alternate motion should the officer's recommendation not get up.
What is your foreshadowed motion, just so we've got an idea?
I'll foreshadow an alternate motion that we advertise at 5% if the officer's recommendation of 5.5% doesn't get up.
Thank you very much for foreshadowing that. Can I please, I'm looking for a speaker for, I'll take one more speaker. Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Would I get to speak as a seconder after speaker 4?
No, you can't speak again. Sorry, say that again.
I haven't spoken as a seconder.
No, you haven't.
Yeah, so do I speak after the speaker 4?
Yeah, you're a speaker 4. I'm asking for a speaker 4 and you have nominated to speak for.
Oh, I just want to take someone's opportunity to speak
Oh,
for.
you mean somebody else? Yeah. Does anybody else want to speak for?
Councillor Lim might have already spoken too. Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm trying to wrap up the debate, really. We've got 3 speakers against, and I was looking for you, because then we've got the wrapping up of the debate.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak now.
Thank you.
So I think it's, so I'm asking the support of the advertised rate of 5.5% because this is something I view that we're dealing with an unknown situation right now with the June CPI not yet been published. As we all know, Perth CPI runs hotter than other states, as spoken by the officers. So we're dealing with an unknown here, and with all the crises happening around the world, it's likely that CPI could be higher than the 4.9% that was mentioned. So it's always, I feel that it's always better to come up with a conservative rate to residents to get them prepared of what could be, a higher rate or higher CPI. So it's really just, letting the residents know that, this is the council's expectation that there is a likelihood that there's going to be an increase in CPI, and therefore the rates, even if we, in the alternate motion decides to go down to 5%, it could very well go back up to the 5.5% again. So I just think that this is setting a very real possibility to our residents that we do need to, to keep it around the 5.5 mark and below. Also, I think that from the last month's motion around, the $4.7 million unbudgeted capital expenditure, we can't just look at it in isolation that we're just trying to pay off the 200K feasibility study for the next year, and whether that's factored into the budget for, financial year 2027. It doesn't work like that. When you do rates modeling, you have to look at it in a long-term financial plan, because you can't, it's not a directly proportionate situation where every 0.5% is 600K of savings. It's a lot more complex than that, because that's 600K we're getting every year. So we're not talking apples to apples when we're considering that with capital expenditure. So what I'm trying to get at is you have to look at it in the broader long-term plan. So you can't just factor in or live year by year. I hope that we are a council that plans longer than that. So I do think also the people that supported or spoke against the 5.5% or wanting to go lower, funnily enough, are the people that supported the increase in infrastructure for John Connor Reserve with the half cricket pitch. So monies don't grow on trees. They actually come from somewhere, and we can't champion.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
What's your point of order?
Councillor Liddon just mentioned John Connor Reserve and half a cricket pitch. That is completely out of order from the discussion that we're having right now.
Okay. Well, I'm explaining how that is unfunded expenditure and how it affects the rates modelling, and it hasn't been considered as per Dr. Tuffin's comment.
Councillor Spanbrook. Yes, if you could move on from that particular
happy to move on
topic,
from
that would be
that.
helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, yeah, I just think that there is financial consequences to our actions, and we have to factor in, an appropriate rate increase to fund these unbudgeted expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGoldrick, would you like to wrap up the debate?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to everyone that's spoken tonight, and it is a tricky decision to make and a brave decision to affirm and thank the council officers for their recommendations at 5.5%. I think everyone knows how tough it is and how respectful we are for the families and ratepayers that we represent. I know how much things are going up, and I noticed that the price of diesel for our fleet of City of Melville rubbish trucks, it currently sits at around $3, and there's speculation it might hit $4. So I guess I agree with Councillor Lim with being prudent and making tough sort of decisions, being brave about setting our sights high and not dipping into reserves. I'm certainly no financial expert, but I do know that the price of Tim Tams every time I go to the shop is doubling weekly, so that's probably a good thing for my weight. But at the end of the day, I think we need to be brave. I think the residents will respect us if we hit at 5.5, and I think we need to consider 5.5 for all of us to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McGoldrick. We are now going to the vote. So you're voting green if you support the officer's recommendation. You're voting red if you do not. And remembering we have a foreshadowed motion. Yes, Councillor Panayiotou?
Yeah, just to clarify, as per the 5.5% officer recommendation, is it?
Yes, the green is for 5.5 officer recommendation, red is for no. Councillor Spanbrook, can you please give us your vote? Are you voting for 5.5% or no?
No, I don't support the officer recommendation.
Green is for 5.5 officer recommendation.
Is that the right number? Yeah, 4-8.
Yeah. It is lost 4-8. Councillor Barber, you had a foreshadowed motion.
Yes, Madam Mayor,
motion.
I would like the city officers to advertise instead of 5.5 as 5%, please.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Woodall. Councillor Barber, do you wish to speak to that motion?
No, I'm happy to go to a vote, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Does Councillor Woodall, do you wish to speak to this?
I just would like to clarify that the 5% will only apply to improved residential and commercial. The unimproved will still be 8%. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, Councillor Wheatland.
Are we able to see the full officer recommendation at 5%, please? Not just that. I'm not voting on that.
Okay, thank you. Can we organise that? Thank you. The officers have prepared it.
Madam Mayor, perhaps it would be prudent. We've just thrown this on the city officers at late notice. Is this going to take much work to... They've done all the
No,
work?
Councillor Barber, the officers have advised us that they have prepared.
Lovely.
In the event that this might happen.
Thank you, officers.
You just bear with us for a few minutes.
Madam Mayor, when you have a moment, I just have a question, please.
Yes, Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you. I just wish to reiterate that even though we're going to, the rate setting strategy will be as such, that'll be advertised. So residents still have 21 days, is that correct? 21 days to put in a submission, and that will then be, then the officers then will review that in due course. Is that correct?
Oh, CEO, Ms Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Spanbrook. Yes, that's correct. So we need to advertise the proposed rates for 21 days. We will gather all the feedback from the community members and we will be presenting that to an elected members engagement session as soon as we have that information available in advance of the council meeting in June.
Thank you.
All right, so now we have Councillor Woodall who is speaking. Can I have your attention, please? Councillor Woodall is going to speak for, I gather. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very briefly, I think it's worth pointing out that the difference between if we end up after advertising settling on a rate increase of 5%, the difference between a rate increase of 5% and 5.5% in the long run is not a huge amount. And I would just point out that we are going to have natural rates growth, probably of 1% as well. So there's that which isn't incorporated into the rate increase. And also the 8% increase for unimproved land, which is slightly higher, does provide, I guess, some additional offset between the 5 and the 5.5. So I don't think there's a, notwithstanding that, it's more an issue of principle, I think, here with, given CPI, the difference between 5 and 5.5 in terms of impact on programs and services and projects, I don't believe is hugely significant, and I think it can be accommodated for, given that a few weeks ago we were discussing and talking about a 4% rate increase. So we talked about 4%, then we talked about 5.5%, and now we're sort of settling seemingly on 5%. So I think it's a reasonable number and it's something that we can work with. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodall. Is there a speaker against?
Madam Mayor, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, Councillor Wheatland.
After the 21 days, when we come back to make the decision about the rates, if there is a strong view from the community that, and if CPI has gone up, are we then able to move an amendment to change it to 5.5%?
Director Corporate Services, Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Wheatland, for the question. Yes, you can. It's not common practice. I'm not aware of it happening, but it's not to say it hasn't happened.
Head of Governance, Ms Newman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for the advice of Council, the table that's on the screen at the moment will update, in essence, the officer recommendation. We would update the table in there with the new figures at 5%. I also just note that point 3, the statement of objects and reasons for the differential rates, that will also need to be updated in the attachments to the document. So we will tidy up the recommendation post-meeting, but just to let councillors know, they are the changes that will occur. Thank you.
Okay, so is there a speaker against? No? Okay, we don't really need to have more speakers for. You want to make a statement? Yes, Councillor Barber.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I just want to reiterate that this is an advertised rate, and so it's still open to negotiation at the June OMC. It might come down. That'd be good. Might go up. However, we do live in a great city. We do offer amazing projects and services. Cost of living is an issue, but community feedback is an issue. And so just want to reiterate that the community have 21 days to contact us, let us know. But I think at the minute this is a fair advertisement. And so I encourage my colleagues to vote this in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barber, for the wrap-up debate. And now we're moving on to the vote. Is there anyone against? If there is no one against, I declare this carried. Oh, you're against. Okay, so we're going to the vote. Councillor Spanbrook, what is your vote, please? Are you green for 5% advertising or red? No.
I'm green, support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Carried 10-2. Okay, thank you very much. We're on to item 11, motions without previous notice. There are no motions without previous notice for this evening. Item 12, decisions made while meeting was behind closed doors. Close to the public, there were no items discussed behind closed doors this evening. And to closure, item 13, for the purposes of the minutes, can the following councillor please confirm she's still in attendance? Councillor Spanbrook.
I am still in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Being no further business, I declare the meeting closed at 9:04. Thank you very much for your attendance and